make a cast over that brush pile and bring wolf packs of spotted bass up.
Georgia is blessed with so many of these electric-only lakes.
No, I didn't say that, Danny. Don't be speculating now.
Okay, guys, we are back with another episode here. I am with someone a lot of you guys will know, and I'd like to go ahead and say this at the beginning. When we first started this, I asked a lot of people, who do you want to hear? Who can we get that will make you tune in to a podcast? And consistently, several names popped up, including the one I'm getting ready to say right now, and that's Mr. Bill Payne. How you doing?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and evidently you must know a lot, because a lot of people want to hear what you got to say. So are you aware of that?
Well, I don't know. All fishermen have a lot to say, but
right.
I don't know how much of it's worth hearing. But I've been around a long time, and I've learned a lot of hard lessons, and maybe I've picked up a few things, but I've learned it most from all the area fishermen here. We got a bunch of great fishermen in North Georgia, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. That we do, and you are amongst them, from what everybody tells me. So we got a lot to cover, and some of the things we're going to cover today are Allatoona, Carter's, little maybe on Blue Ridge and stuff. But before we get to that, I'd like for you to just take a few minutes and kind of tell them a little bit about who you are. Who is Bill Payne?
Well, I'm just a North Georgia boy, grew up in a small town, Adairsville, Georgia. Didn't even have a red light when I was growing up, and
right.
And I guess growing up in North Georgia in the 50s and 60s, I guess one of my favorite things was when I had to go to the barber shop. I would hear all the guys, the older men around town, talking about their fishing trips and hunting trips. And my dad, and he was not a fisherman or a hunter, but I think I got the bug from just hearing the guys around town at the barber shop talking about their trips. And I thought, that's pretty interesting. And we didn't have a rec department in our town, and during the summer, a lot of times, some days, the neighborhood kids, which really was about the whole town, it's so small,
right.
We would play baseball, or we'd crawl through a window at the gym in the winter and play basketball. And sometimes in the spring and summer, when we were out of school, we would all gang up and go to the local creek or a pond and fish all day.
Right, and that doesn't happen as much anymore. These kids these days, they
That's
don't
right.
get that. And I think an interesting thing you said was, going to the barber shop. That's another lost thing too, where people just gather around and listen to the old men gossip and everything.
Yeah.
It's been replaced by Facebook and stuff
That's
like
right.
that.
Well, I'm on Facebook, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. I get it. So what kind of fishing did you do, though, as a youth? We're talking about just chasing bass, brim. Did you have a particular favorite thing to do?
Well, in the beginning, we would go to there was a cotton gin in town, and that's where we went to get our red wigglers. And
okay,
you would go there, and we'd all go as a gang and get our worms, and then we would go to the creek, and we would fish with live worms, and we would catch carp, bass, anything that would bite.
Right, just something to waste of time right there.
And then I guess as I got a little older, and then I guess the early years of high school, began to fish ponds and little lakes more, and bass fishing was the thing, you
right.
know. And I guess that was about the time that I saw my first Bass Pro Shop catalog a little later on, and Bassmaster magazine in the late 60s, I guess. And,
right.
But watched Bill dance on TV, and I was, traipsing around ponds and creeks and thinking I was Bill Dance when I caught a little nice fish or something, but I didn't have a boat.
But you didn't wear a Tennessee hat, though, did you?
No, I did not. But it was all fun, and I guess some people get the bug for a lot of things, but fishing and a little bit of hunting. I was never a deer hunter or anything, but I had bird dogs, and we liked to quail hunt. And some people that go fishing with me, the older guys that know about quail hunting from the older, back in the 60s and 70s and even into the early 80s, I guess, I talk about schools of bass and how they their habits are similar to quail. They follow edges, and
that's true.
You have a school and you catch one and it busts them up like a covey of quail, and they have to gather back up. And there's a lot of similarities there between hunting and fishing. And people that are outdoorsmen, they know, deer follow these tree lines and are edge oriented, and quail are the same way, and fish are a lot the same way.
So it's very interesting, quail hunting, especially in North Georgia. There's still some opportunities in South Georgia, but not a lot here in North Georgia. That's almost a lost thing these days.
It's been years since I've seen a covey of quail run across a country road or anything like that.
I think it's been about 4 or 5 years ago we saw some in Wilkes County on a lease that I got out there, but it's just, I remember my grandfather, and then I guess it was just that generation, they got to hunt quail. Now, down South Georgia, of course, you still can do that, but it's very interesting that you make the relationship between two different species of animals, fish and quail, because there are a lot of similarities if you think about it, and I've never had anybody put it that way.
Yeah, they're edge oriented. I mean, if you look for those similarities, and from chasing quail around North Georgia and around soybean fields and around hedgerows, and sometimes just like bass are schooled up and they're out in the middle on shad, they can be out in the middle of a field sometimes, but edges is where they feel safe,
Right.
They have sanctuary close by, and bass are a lot like that too in a lot of ways.
See, there's our first tip of the day right there. Work the edges and stuff like that. So at what time or at what age, I would guess it would be better to say, did you kind of get the feeling, or let's start over. When did you get your first bass boat? When did you actually get on a real big lake?
Well, I wanted some kind of a boat forever, but it wasn't meant to be, I guess, because I actually graduated from high school, went to college, got a degree in business, and I started to work. And a little after that, a couple of years, I got married, and it's a wonder I still have my wife, because the first thing I wanted to do, and she was crazy enough to let me, is buy a boat. And we bought a boat before we bought a house. So
that's crazy these days.
That shows you how I started and how smart or not I was at that time. But I had to have that boat.
I would say you're kind of crazy. You wouldn't get that from a lot of women these days. I need a boat, honey.
And my children, my son, he'd be too smart to do that. So
you're just a brave old man.
So I've had a boat ever since.
Well, that makes that, you do it however you got to get it done, right?
Yeah. So
did you jump straight into just fishing, just trying to, which lakes did you start your experiences on?
Well, being in Adairsville, I guess it was natural to gravitate to Allatoona, and I fished there, and I fished at Carter's, and of course, not that I'm saying I know so much now, but I didn't know anything then.
Right.
I just knew to keep casting, and so I had a lot of fun there, and I don't know, probably less than a year after I got a boat, I joined the Cartersville Bass Club, a bunch of great guys, and learned a lot from them, and maybe some of it all wasn't good, and
right.
I learned how to talk fishing a lot, maybe before I learned how to actually do fishing.
I think a lot of us do that.
But as someone told me, an old saying is, you got to fake it till you make it, and I guess that's what a lot of us Bass Club guys were doing when we first started.
Right.
But if you stick it out long enough, you start learning a little bit.
Right, just experience.
Yeah.
Well, how has Allatoona and Carter's, and we'll get more specific in them lakes, but when you fished it back in the day, how's it changed since that? Because it's got to be a little bit different, I would think.
Well, both of them have changed quite a lot. I mean, probably the thing that's most humorous to me is when they first started having tournaments that I know of at Carter's on Thursday evenings. They would start at I can't remember if it's 6:30 or 7. I think it was 7. But I would work all day, and I would run home and not even have time to eat, and grab the boat and hope I could make it up there by the time blast off. And on the way, me and a buddy, we'd be talking about this and that, about what we were going to do, and really what we were hoping is that we would get 5 or 6 bites.
Right. Okay.
And that's the honest truth, because if you could catch 3 or 4 fish, often you could win, because there was a lot of tournaments on Thursday nights way back when, where 4.5 pounds would win the tournament.
Now, would it be largemouth or spots back then?
It would be spotted bass, but now there were more largemouth back then too, I think, and some big ones, but we rarely caught them then. It was just a deal. In the summer, in the evenings, we would fish till 11 o'clock, and honestly, you were hoping. I mean, if you got 7 or 8 bites, it was a great
Really?
night. But at that point in time, all we were doing is just going around the bank, casting a worm, and probably fishing it too fast, and everything else we could do wrong. But occasionally we would catch one, and it was exciting. And if we caught 3 or 4, we knew we were going to be in the thick of the competition. But that sounds kind of funny now, but that's the way it was.
Okay, so that's on Carter's. How was Allatoona back in the day like that? Similar?
Well, no, it was. I think it was a lot better, really. I'd kind of gotten the idea. The Dead Sea moniker for Allatoona has been around quite a while, but I always found that for the most part, fishing was pretty good at Allatoona, in that you could get bites and you could catch some, even if they weren't the biggest specimens.
Right.
Even though I can tell you, years back, Allatoona had some great, had big largemouth. I mean, the size now on Allatoona is really pretty small compared to what it used to be. I know a lot of the guys from way back, Danny Thurman and so forth, it was nothing for them to catch 20-pound stringers or more.
Really?
Largemouth. And, I mean, there's been a lot of big catches on Allatoona over the years. And I think right now, size-wise, it's probably as hard as it's ever been, though. The size overall generally has gone down, even though there are some very nice catches made now. I think the catches for the winter tournaments generally is better than it is in the summer.
Right.
For the night tournaments. The guys on the Sunday morning tournaments, they turn in some good catches along.
Well, at what point did you start guiding on Allatoona? How long did you fish it before you had actually started? Did you fish tournaments and stuff?
Well, I fished a lot of tournaments. I spent a lot of time at Lake Weiss for years. I fished every tournament I could fish over there, and used to fish over there every weekend, and every off day I had, that was where I went for some years. But Allatoona's always been a place I'd go to just because it was close, and it's always been, to me, a lot of fun. And the drawdown, they take it down 16, 17 feet or so in the winters, and it's always been interesting to me to get out there and look at the structures, look at the rock formations, and just see what's out there. And I've been fishing it so long, I don't know, it's almost, it may sound kind of funny, but I have a lot of nostalgia surrounding, I visit places and I think, I used to come and fish this place 35 years ago. And,
right.
And it's kind of just got some favorite spots and a lot of places that I have fond memories of. So that's definitely I'd have to say my home lake.
Your home lake, okay.
Yeah.
And how long you been guiding on Allatoona?
Well, I've been fortunate over the years. I worked for Shaw Industries in manufacturing for 18 years, and I had my own business for 18 years. And in my own business, I had a good bit of freedom, and I had a friend through the years that wanted me to help him guide. I had a guy at Lake Lanier that I knew, and occasionally he'd want me to come and take a party and so forth. And I would do it, but I didn't have much time. Most of the time I was either working or going to tournaments, and it didn't leave a lot of time for that. And then a friend of mine in these later years, he began to guide, and he would want me to help him on occasion and then do some trips for him, and I would do that, but it wasn't, it probably wasn't just something that I was dying to do. I mean, I love to fish, but I like to fish tournaments, and I don't know, in these later years as my professional life working kind of came to an end and so forth, I got more interested in it. And I guess the surprising thing about guiding to me, something that I didn't really take into account, is one of the most fun things about it to me is all the people I meet. Actually, I wind up fishing with people from all over the country. Now, they're not coming to Georgia just to fish Lake Allatoona, of course.
Right.
Like some lakes are real destinations, but there's a lot of people that come to Atlanta on business and are in North Georgia for various reasons, and it's very interesting, all the people I meet from different places with different experiences fishing different lakes, whether it be in Utah or Arizona or New York or wherever. It's a lot of fun to, fishermen, we kind of, at least bass fishermen, we kind of speak a universal language.
That's true,
and, so it's a lot of fun. That's a real rewarding part to me. And high school fishing has become a big thing. And in some of my previous work life, I instructed kids actually in music, in band summer band camps.
Okay.
When I was in college, I would teach those, and so I've always kind of had an education background of teaching and so forth, even though I've been in industry in most of my work life. But
you play an instrument?
I do.
What do you
I
play?
actually went to college on a music scholarship. I was a trumpet player.
Trumpet player.
At Jacksonville State.
Can you still do it?
I could, but I probably not nearly as well, but I could still play.
If I'd have known that, I'd have had one right here for you.
Well, that'd probably provided a laugh or two for some people, I'm sure. But teaching those kids, that was a fun thing for me. And now getting people, whether they're high school kids or, there's a lot of adults that have worked so hard and they haven't had time for fishing, or if they did, it was a very leisure activity that they just get to do sporadically, and they want to learn fishing. And so it's rewarding to me to be able to take people out. And I'm not saying I'm the greatest fisherman and I know more than all the other guys, because I don't. But, if you are at whatever position you are on the ladder on your fishing evolution, there's people that are below you that you can help.
Right.
And it's one of my main goals when people go out with me. If they're really wanting to learn, I try to teach them something they can build on and gain some confidence in. And if I'm not doing that, I'm not doing a good job.
So it's kind of something that you you didn't set out to be a guide. It's just kind of evolved.
Yeah, I thought about, I had some health issues and kind of cut my work life a little short, and I began to think about doing some consulting in the industry and this and that. And I got to thinking, the funny part was all the people that worked in the part of the industry that I did, they all think they're smarter than everybody else anyway.
Right.
So I didn't know about consulting with those people, and I like fishing enough. I didn't know how, and I've had some tournament success over the years, quite a bit.
Okay, well,
different lakes.
Well, let's hear a little bit about that.
Well,
it's okay. You can brag on yourself a little bit.
Well, I don't do well bragging. If I brag very much, I get run over from behind with a Mack truck.
But humbly tell us about your successes.
But I've won a good many tournaments on Lake Allatoona. I've won some on Carter's. I've won some on Chickamauga. I've won quite a few on Lake Weiss over the years, and even a few at Lake Lanier. But
Now, is this just more open tournaments, kind of like club tournaments and stuff? Or
club or open pot tournaments or little series that different, back in the 80s there was a series called the Tri-State Series, and we fished Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee.
Right.
And, I fished with a fella named Billy Bearden, who's passed away, who was kind of, I guess, my fishing mentor. He was a great fisherman, and we fished tournaments together, and we had a lot of success. And I'd quickly admit, mainly because of him, probably. But I picked up a lot of stuff on the way, and won a few tournaments, of course, on my own and with other partners. And I learned some from other partners that I've had. I've had some good fishing buddies over the years, and I'm sure they may have learned a little from me, but together we were learning a lot and had some success.
And that's the way it should work anyway.
And the fact is, if you can't learn something from somebody in the boat with you, I don't care if you're actually a better fisherman than they are. You're not paying attention if you don't learn something from them, because everybody has a different outlook at things and the way they perceive approaching a certain technique or whatever, and there's something to be learned from a lot of different people. And I try to, while I'm out there to teach people, I've always got my eyes open and ears open and try to have an open mind. I've even had deals where a guy's casting a certain lure, and I'm thinking, gosh, I want to say you're never going to catch one that way, but I always catch myself, because there's been a time or two when they caught more than I thought they could, and I thought, maybe I've had a closed mind about this, the way they're retrieving this lure or whatever, and so I'm always looking to learn. Even now, I'll be learning till my last day on a bass boat, I think, if I can.
I'm just going to ask just a question that's totally, it's on subject, but it has nothing to do with anything. But have you ever caught a fish on a whopper plopper?
Yeah.
Have you?
Bunches.
Okay, because listen, I've watched Josh throw a whopper plopper for 2 years, and he loves it, but I don't know. I can't stand the lure itself. People either love it or they hate it. So what's your take on a whopper plopper? And the only reason, because you said that, you see somebody throwing it, you make a judgment, and I have done that. So am I being closed-minded on the whopper plopper?
Well, you are. I mean, I'm slow. I've learned another lesson about myself. I hear about these hot baits, and I'm always kind of here's another hot bait they're selling and whatever, and then I'm slow to gravitate to it, and then I find out it really was a real thing, and I was just too stubborn to jump on it or experiment. Well,
that might be me.
These whopper ploppers, it's about replaced a buzz bait for me. I used to love to cast a buzz bait, but I mean, you take this past September, I mean, at Allatoona, we were catching a lot of days 30 or 40 fish a day on a whopper plopper.
Oh, good Lord, don't say that, because next time we go to Stamp Creek, Josh is going to have one tied on a whopper plopper.
When they're on it, they're on it.
They're on it. Okay, well, you maybe it was just me. I've been stubborn and closed-minded, so.
I learned a big lesson years ago at Lake Wise. We'd been catching fish out of the grass in the early summer on spinner baits and buzz baits for years, and it just seemed like a few years ago I just couldn't get bit on a buzz bait in the grass over at Weiss, and I'd go in for the weigh-in at a tournament, and somebody'd be talking about, we caught 4 on top water on this, or we caught them on that out of the grass on top, and I'm thinking, wow, I can't. They won't hit my buzz bait. Well, come to find out, they're throwing a horny toad, and that was another one of those things that I thought, well, I like my buzz bait. I'm not going to be throwing some plastic frog swimming it over the grass.
Right.
But I was about 3 years late to the party on that. But
well, I think you and I might be cut out of the same cloth right there like that. So that's funny. let's talk Allatoona.
Okay.
Okay, so you pretty much, we've established you guide there. You have fished there for a long time. It's your home lake. You've won tournaments there, so you should know a little bit about Allatoona.
I do, but I never start to assume I know too much.
Okay,
because that lake can pull the rug out from under you if you think you know too much sometimes.
Right. Well, that might be true, but we do find that in our quest to get people on podcasts and to talk, very easy to get people from Lake Lanier to come down here and talk. Everybody likes Lake Lanier. It's easy. There's something about the guys at Allatoona. We can't get a lot of information out of them for some reason. And they're there's a few, like the young man Garrett from Kennesaw State that came on, and he gave some good information on Allatoona. But it seems like that community is kind of like something's going on. There's a secret over there they don't want to let out.
Well, the tournament competition at Lake Allatoona, even though it may be just Lake Allatoona and the weights may not be high, the guys up at Chickamauga aren't. When 11 pounds wins a tournament, they think how pitiful that is.
Right.
But it's all relative, and I'm going to tell you, the competition at Lake Allatoona is second to none anywhere. That is a competitive a place, and like the guys that fish the Monday Nighters, not just the Monday Nighters, but it's been going on a long time. You know, Bob Smith puts on tournaments through year-round, but right now he has a Sunday afternoon tournament. But the night tournaments, a couple a month through, June, July, and August, and maybe into September. But it is fierce competition, no doubt. I mean, I mentioned Danny Thurmond a little bit ago. Everybody that's been around Allatoona knows Danny. He's won tons of tournaments down there, and his son is right in his footsteps, and he wins a lot of tournaments now.
All right.
You got him and Tom Kazmersky and just a host of guys that are capable of winning any tournament any night down there. And I mentioned those two, but they're not the only ones. There's some others as well. And they do their homework. They put out their brush piles. And one of the funniest stories, one of the guys told me, he said, we were down here last Thursday night and put in 5 brush piles, and we were fishing them on the Monday night tournament. And we went to one of them, and there was already a boat on it. So
it don't take long for people to find those things, does it?
No, but the guys that do the best, I think, not in every case, but they actively put out brush, and they're good at where they can put it and hide it, and they're good at catching them out of it. And I guess guys like me, I haven't put out a brush pile in a long time, and I rely on a lot of natural stuff and other stuff I find.
Right.
And if I find something else like a brush pile, well, you can bet somebody else or 2 dozen others or more know it and are fishing it too. But
I think that's on every big lake now, especially with spots like those brush piles.
But the competition's fierce down there, and we got a lot of great fishermen on the lake. And I've just mentioned a couple of them, but and then there's these young kids that are coming up. They're capable of competing too. They've learned a lot so fast, and there's not as many secrets as there used to be, honestly. So
right.
I can understand why people are not
not
willing to just tell everything that they know. And then sometimes you could tell people stuff, and
you
still might not even help them that much.
Right. They still got to be able to do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And,
well, what about the lake itself? Kind of just for those who are going to listen to this that aren't familiar with Lake Allatoona, maybe kind of describe it a little bit, what kind of lake it is, because it is different than Lanier. And,
like Lanier, it is a highland reservoir. It's fed mainly by the Etowah River. Little River feeds in, and Allatoona Creek. And Allatoona Creek and the Etowah meet right at the dam. And I think the thing that strikes me about Allatoona is the geology of the lake. There's rock. You can even look up on in the hardwoods on the hillsides, and you can see these boulders sticking out.
They're
of
everywhere.
the ground.
They're everywhere.
Well, there's boulders down under the water too, and they run out, and they have these great outcroppings of rock right before they drop into the channel or the ditch that's nearby, and they're just.
And this is natural. So when
it's
they flooded it,
natural
that's what was there.
And one of the things I think they did, not that I'm an expert about how they built the lake in the late 40s, but they kind of cleaned Allatoona out. You know, they took everything down, and that's why there's a lot of bare banks, and there's some stumps out there, and there's those rocks, but to my knowledge, there's never been any standing timber.
Yeah, so it's
anything.
not like Lanier where they came and they just chopped it off and left the.
No,
Okay.
no, they really did a job of cleaning that basin out when they were making the lake.
And it's older than Lanier. Is that what you're saying? If it was in the 40s?
It is, yes.
Okay, I did not know that.
I think that lake was. I don't know if they started backing the water up in 49 or what it was, but somewhere around 1950, maybe a little earlier.
Just a little bit earlier than Lanier.
So those those boulders play a big part of natural cover. You know, not being a fisherman or even being born when they backed the lake up. Some of the fellows I've known over the years that have fished down there in the 50s, they were telling me that originally in the lake there were just a few places where they pushed up some trees, and they called them tree shelters, and they actually had signs up that said like no fishing within 100 feet. It was like a fish sanctuary,
like a sanctuary, like somebody would do on a hunting club. You can't hunt that 100 acres right there.
And I had a fellow that knew where some of those were, and I know where those places, some of them are, and they do have some fish around them, but I'm sure a lot of guys know where those places, they may not have known they were fish sanctuaries at one time.
But they know that there's structure right there.
Probably one of the most interesting things that I had a customer, a client, tell me about, that there was a gold mine, a mining operation, a gold mine up in Allatoona Creek, and that they grew up around that area up there, and he was telling me that about that, and I've always wondered exactly where it was, but his dad worked around that, and he was telling me some story about one of the government valuation of gold changed at some time during the 40s, and it actually shut that little mine down.
Wasn't worth nothing.
Now, I don't know anything other than what this fella told me, and I think he's a reputable guy, but that was very interesting to me. And I guess one of the other things about the lake, you know, before that thing was dammed up, you had the river and the creek, and some of the folks I take, if we're up around the Allatoona area, you know, I tell them about the Battle of Allatoona Pass. You know, there were 1,600 soldiers killed there on the banks of where the lake is right now.
Really?
And I can imagine back in the 1860s that those soldiers kind of following the creek down in the valley there around and working up. There was a railroad supply station there, and that's what the battle was over, control of that. That's how it was a Confederate outpost, and the Union captured it, and they were supplying Sherman as he marched through Georgia through that supply station. And the railroad runs the same path even today, right there on the lake there at Allatoona Landing.
Really?
And it's you know, so there's a lot of history around there.
That's some amazing history right there. That
yeah.
I, again, never heard of that. I had no idea.
Now a lot of people haven't, but that's the Etowah Historical Society there in Bartow County. If you get on their website, they have a lot of information about that.
Okay, well there you go. Everybody make sure they check that out. I think I'll do that myself.
But you know, Kennesaw's below that. But we had a lot of history, Civil War history through that area, through Georgia, and even right there at Lake Allatoona. There's nothing about fishing, but that just makes it.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, you know, we're fishing brush piles and rock formations right where those soldiers were battling it out. You know.
And you know what? Again, I've never thought about that, but it'd be hard not to next time I go on the lake and I see, you know, the rocks and the stuff like that, to think about that. if you're taking somebody on Allatoona right now, and it's currently February, and let's say we're targeting spotted bass. Maybe not your best kept secrets or whatever, but a couple of techniques that you would use to show somebody, if you're going out, this is what I would do.
Well, Allatoona, as I grew up and was around Allatoona, to start with, I told you about when I was a kid, when we were out in the summer, we would fish. Well, I grew up thinking as a small kid that fishing was a spring and summertime activity.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
I had to get a little older before I realized and saw that people fished in cold weather and different things. Of course, I learned that when I was a teenager, and then when I started fishing and I got a boat. Allatoona has always been known as a good wintertime lake, and really different from a lot of places, at least through the years. It's a good crankbait lake in the winter.
Okay.
As the water cools and everything, fish aren't supposed to chase as much and this, that, and the other. But one of the greatest things about winter to me, and the most fun things, is they lower the level of the lake. Mm-hmm. We get the rains in the winter. It stains up the water, even to almost chocolate milk color, and you can take little crankbaits that'll run 4 to 8 feet deep, and you can cast around on the bank and bump around brush and rocks, and you can catch a lot of fish. It's a great fun bite. Nowadays they call it finesse cranking.
Right. Small
baits and you wind it down, bump the bottom, slow it, stop it, let it deflect. It deflects off, or you pause it, and that's when you get that bite. And that's a real fun bite. All this rain. Today we've had a several inches of rain, and we got more rain forecast next week. And there's places, I looked at the lake today that they're almost chocolate milk colored, and I just think about that crankbait bite. Even though the water's definitely going to rise, it may jump up 3, 4, 5 feet in the next few days. It's going to cover some of those little rock formations and brush piles that are going to be 4 to 6 foot, 8 foot deep, and you bounce a crankbait around that. It's just a real fun bite.
You got any suggestions on a particular crankbait company?
Well, something like a Rapala DT6, Bandit 200, and those are things you can buy. Bill Lewis has come out with an MR6, I think it is. Little small crankbaits, not necessarily square bills, although that might work, but these smaller crankbaits that will dive into that range. And it's kind of funny, you talk crankbaits, I'm still using a lot of Rebel Humpies and
right.
We-Rs that they made years ago, and that's
because they work.
Little Rebel Humpy is one of my favorite, and I hate to tell stuff like this, but just last night, I guess I bought $200 worth of them on eBay. Just
because you had to have them.
Well, I've got a collection that's a little bit obscene. I may have a couple of hundred, but that's one of my little weaknesses, getting those little crankbaits. And not to get too far into it, but there's a little bit of inconsistency in the manufacturing process, and all of them don't work the same as you can't just get one and say it's like, the one. Yeah. Some of them have a lot wider wobble. Some of them have a little slide. They don't want to dig in, and some of them just have a little different action. But if you can get one that has the tight wobble, now if it runs to one side, you can adjust some of that.
Right.
But that's kind of a little obsession of mine, those little crankbaits. The fellow I used to fish with, I couldn't prove this, but I wouldn't be surprised to think that he was probably one of the best in the world at that. And so I learned from what I think's the best, and
right.
have a lot of memories associated with that. But there's a lot of new crankbaits. The Spro makes the new little rock crawler. They make one that dives 9 to 14, but the new one is a got a shorter bill, and it hits that range. It looks great. But
any particular color?
Well, in the muddy water, basically, or really stained water, there's two colors that you want to hang your hat on mostly, and that's chartreuse and then a crawfish, even to the reds. Reds, yellows, and chartreuse are proven colors in stained water, and I think that remains true to this day. So.
Now, is the crankbait bite on Allatoona year-round, or it's just basically really strong in the wintertime?
Well, a lot of guys will disagree probably, but I never like to throw crankbaits in clear water or even just lightly stained water.
So you like the mud, you like the muck, and
when it gets muddy, I think more fish are going to move shallow, and they're going to feel some security up there. They're going to get next to something. The muddier or more stained it is, the tighter the cover they're going to get, and they're going to get shallow. And when you bump those crankbaits around that shallow water, you can get a reaction bite off those fish. Some of them will be white nearly. They don't have a lot of color to them because they're in that stained water. And,
right.
Also, I failed to mention, a shad wrap is known as one of the all-time great cold water crankbaits, but and it definitely works. It's not my favorite, but that's just me. A lot of people do great on it, and that's just another one of those baits I didn't rush to years ago, but I found out the hard way it does work. But I've got my favorites and my style of doing that, and probably a lot of the guys out there have theirs too.
Well, speaking of your style now, on your crankbaits, what's your opinion on the silent ones and those that have rattles in them? Do you prefer rattles in your crankbaits, or you like them just be solid and just let the vibration speak for itself?
Well, they both work. I tell you, not to be a nerd, a lot of people wouldn't even be interested in this, but there's 3 iterations of the Rebel Humpy crankbait. The first one was the original one, and it's about a 2 1/4 inch body with a plastic lip, and it did not have a rattle.
Okay.
The next one they came out with was still the small frame, and they called it a rattling humpback, and it looks identical, but it does have a rattle in it. And then the last generation was just a little bit bigger, and they had rattles in them. And I've seen them all work really well, regardless if it's got a rattle or not. Those fish up there that are shallow and they're right next to cover, they can feel the vibrations on that, and noise may make a difference sometimes, but I don't really pay a lot of attention to that, although most crankbaits have rattles in them now, and I don't know if that's to sell the fishermen or if it just really is that important to the fish. But I don't really let that play a part.
Play a part in it.
Yeah.
Now, before we go to the next lake, I'm going to ask you this, just because is that the only collectible bait or crankbait, or do you have a collection of all kinds?
Well,
because it sounds to me like you might have a problem.
I've got quite a lot, and I've got a 45-year collection, but I don't have any lures that I don't use. Now, I know some guys that have really collections. They're in these glass cases. They've got the boxes with them.
That's what I was going to ask.
Never been fished. That's not me.
Okay.
If I buy a Bagley square bill BB3 on eBay, it's to use. It's not to look at.
All right. So.
And I have bought some of them, and that to me is the all-time greatest balsa square bill that's ever been made.
And what is that again?
It's a Bagley B3 balsa crankbait.
Balsa
crankbait. I don't know.
Beats any of them. That is the top of the line. Best of the
You
best.
can throw that in a blowdown and wind it, and if it hits a limb, you can just start winding harder, and it'll come through there and get all kind of strikes. And if I do that with a Lucky Craft, I'm gonna have to go over there and dig it out of there probably. Right. But there's something about those old Bagleys that were special, and And I know there's guys that make custom crankbaits even up to $75 or $100 each, but I don't think they're as good as the original Bagleys. But again, there's some inconsistency. Some of them work a little better than others.
Right.
But that's another story. But what I buy, I use. I'm not a collector to look at things.
So you've got a useful collection. That's what
right.
you're saying.
If I buy a humpy that's still in the box and it might be worth a lot, if I kept it in the box, I won't keep it in the box. I'm going to tie it on and see if it's one of those that work really well and it's got that good tight wiggle and the right vibration.
So you got some that, okay, this one works, it's going with me. This one goes to the right. We're just going to put it on the shelf as an emergency.
It might be good to look at, but...
Right, okay. I got to ask, how many crankbaits do you have right now? You got a number?
I've never counted
just
them.
Just give me a guess.
I don't know, 1,000.
1,000 crankbaits?
Yeah.
Good Lord. And all of them, you like the older styles?
Well, I've got some of the older ones, and I've got a lot of memories, and I still catch fish on them. But I'm always, I'm ashamed to say this, and I was down at the dugout yesterday, and I went back today, and I walked out of there with crankbaits both days. So,
Well, speaking of the dugout, you and I had talked earlier, and I believe they're one of your sponsors, correct?
Yes. Jamie and the crew down there, and they're a great bunch, and they've got tackle for serious bass fishermen and people like me that can't go in there without coming out of there with some stuff.
They love seeing you coming.
That's right.
He's just smiling when he sees you walking through the door.
Craig and Jamie, they know I can't resist it. I'm gonna go out of there with something. I bought 2 spinner baits down there today. These I said these look more like jewelry than fishing lures. But I'm gonna have to try this.
Well, we need to get down there and meet the people at Dugout. I've heard a lot of good things about him, and Josh would be just like you are. He can't go nowhere without spending $100. He'll tell you, and if they got pretty stuff there, he's gonna buy it. So
well, they've got it. It's a dangerous place to go in.
That's good. Now, and where is the Dugout located?
It's down at Marietta. It's I say Kennesaw, but I think technically it's Marietta. But if you go, I guess it's south of Barrett Parkway. It's Field Road or Field Lane,
okay.
And it's about 2 or 3 miles south of where Barrett crosses 41.
Now, how's his kids doing in college? He has a couple that are fishing.
He has a daughter, Lee Rose. She's doing great. She goes to Carson Newman, and she's on their team. And of course, they've got a really good team, and they've won tournaments, and she's doing great. And Carter, his son, I've fished with him, and he's 17. He's in high school, and he's like fishing with an adult. He probably can cast better than I can, and mature
beyond his years.
Oh yeah. He's both those kids can, if they want to be in the fishing industry, whether it be working for a big company or fishing the trail, I'm sure they can do it.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. And like I said, we've heard lots of good things about them. We need to get down there and meet them and see what it's all about. So let's transition over from Allatoona to Carter's. Now, Carter's, that's a definitely different lake than Allatoona. We're talking depth. We're talking location. I hear all kinds of different things. So for somebody that's listening, give them a little bit about Carter's, the type of lake it is and what it's got in it.
Well, it's another highland reservoir, and of course, I guess the thing that makes Carter's unique is it's over 450 feet deep at the dam. Mm-hmm. It's the highest or deepest dirt filled dam east of the Mississippi River. There's some of the Great Lakes up there that have some deeper spots in it, but it's definitely very deep, and it doesn't have the rock formations like Allatoona, and generally the banks are steeper, even though, it's got some points and things that run out. There's a world of standing timber down in that lake. And,
okay, so it has the timber.
And I think they cut it off around the 40-foot line. And just like Lanier, you can go back into the creeks, and the timber line will stop somewhere in there. It may be around 70 feet before you get past the timber going back into a pocket, and I guess another difference. There's a good walleye fishery there.
Oh, okay.
There's nowadays.
Do you like walleye fishing, or you just catch them?
Well, I don't.
You don't target them?
I can't target them. Now,
Right.
there may be somebody that listens to this and say, well, that's just shows what he knows.
Right.
Because every time I have a few pictures of walleye, invariably I'll get 2 or 3 calls from people that say, can you take me walleye fishing?
Uh-huh.
And I have to say, well, I'd like to take you walleye fishing, but no, really, I can't take you walleye fishing.
Okay.
Because we might just catch bass.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever, but it's best to go bass fishing and then take the walleye as a bonus when you run across them. But
Gotcha.
we don't catch them every time out, and if I had to go just catch walleye right now, I couldn't do it.
Well, at least you're honest.
But they do frequent the same areas, and as bass in the winter, lots of times they're out in the ditches and they're on bait, and we catch them 40, 50, 60, 70, 80
Wow.
feet deep. I have caught them at 100 feet.
Well, what kind of equipment do you use to catch spots or walleyes or anything like that in that deep of water? What are we talking there?
Well, the old jigging spoon is an old reliable. You get a 3/4 ounce jigging spoon like a War Eagle or of course, the best known name over the years is probably a Hopkins, although I don't even use a Hopkins. But the War Eagle, the Cotton Cordell makes a spoon that's available, just a lot of stores, and then there's just a lot of jigging spoons, nothing special. It's a lot of sonar fishing that time of year. You find the bait out, you can see the schools of fish around it many times, and you drop a bait to it, and a lot of times they fire off on it.
Any particular rod and reel combos you use? Or anything like that?
A medium or medium heavy, and 12, 14-pound line. And I'd even use a 1/2 ounce spoon sometimes, but when it's real deep, it gets a little tedious on waiting on it to get down there.
Right.
But catch them like that. Swim baits. You can catch the walleye and bass on swim baits when they're out in the ditches attached to bait, pretty much.
Now, would you fish for the spots similar to the way they do over in Lanier? I mean, is that...
Except a lot deeper. They're not as deep at Lanier as they are at Carter's. And they really get on bait a lot in the wintertime. But, that's pretty confined to the winter. But otherwise, it's the same fishing structure or fishing cover out on structure, long points that run out before they drop off pretty sharply. You have brush on it. The pallet piles at the core you can look online and get the coordinates for those.
Okay.
And then there's brush piles that people put out, and then there's some natural cover out on some of those break lines, whether it be points or humps. And
Well, what's your favorite way to fish Carter's? If you could do it at any time of the year, what's your favorite way to do it?
the favorite is probably the wintertime swim bait bite.
Okay.
That's, like last Wednesday we caught 35. Catch some big numbers a lot of days and catch some big ones, but you can focus offshore and do that stuff, or you can drag worms and jigs in the back of pockets, out on structure. That's fun. But I also like in the spring the spinnerbait bite if we get the right conditions. And
what would those be?
Well, there's two different. You can catch the spotted bass even in the clear water when there's a pretty good chop or a little bit of wind blowing. When they're out there on some of that stuff, you can burn those baits and get them to come up on it. But I like it when there's we get enough rain and it doesn't happen that often, but when that lake gets stained and it kind of stabilizes, when it's really first, if you have the big rains and there's trash everywhere and it's really muddy, it doesn't seem like they bite that well. But after 2 or 3 days, it kind of settles just a little bit.
Right.
You can take a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait and work that 10 to 12 foot in the water column just off of some of those points, blunt points, and some of them that run out a ways. But at that time, it seems like you can catch them closer to the bank, and they really, a spinnerbait is really a deadly tool during that time.
And again, you talking the same thing that you would like on Allatoona with your colors, chartreuse and that stained water?
Yeah.
You like that and all that?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that's probably the best. But then in the clear water, sometimes there's different opportunities in the fall or in the spring, even in the clear water, where you can catch some big ones on a spinnerbait around some cover really close to deep water.
Now, Carters compared to Allatoona, the average size of the fish, they bigger at Carters?
Much bigger.
Easier to catch at Allatoona?
Better numbers at Allatoona, bigger fish at Carters.
Now, does Carters have the herring and all that?
Carters does have a population of blueback herring. That's another thing in the early summer. You can burn a Seville over some of that offshore cover and draw up a big school of 4 or 5 pound spots that crash that thing, just like at Lanier. But
now, does Carter get the fishing pressure like Allatoona and Lanier?
Well, it's smaller,
right.
And I think there are, I don't want to say there's fewer of those key spots, but in some ways there are, and
right.
It doesn't take as many people to get that lake a little crowded, although, you could say, well, you're talking about community holes anyway, and in some, and I guess you could describe it that way, but
right.
But yeah, there's plenty of traffic on Carters, especially on the weekends. But now, on the weekdays, most of the time it's pretty
open on the weekdays. Now, when you guide, do you guide for spotted bass only, or do you guide for stripers or anything else?
Well, I don't guide for stripers. Now
okay.
we catch some, but
so you're strictly bass. So that's what you're going after.
I don't really use live bait, but now. That's not to say on occasion somebody calls me up and says, I got my 9-year-old. He's not a good caster. It's wintertime. They want to go. I may go over to, I may get some little trout and
right.
take some of those kids fishing and drop trout and down there and let them catch some. But generally, I don't catch bait or use bluebacks or shad or whatever. I'm not set up to do that,
Gotcha.
There's plenty of guys that are, and they catch stripers, and
so they're there. They're there. But,
yeah.
okay.
Oh yeah. You got a lot of the guys that guide at Allatoona and some others that they guide for stripers and hybrids at Carters, but I pretty much just stick to bass.
Okay. Now, you mentioned you spoke a lot about the tournament trail and the competition at Allatoona. You got anything like that at Carter's?
Yeah. I guess it's, there's less population up that way. But, yeah, you've got some guys that really catch them up there. And Teddy Childers puts on a winter Saturday morning tournament. He catches them really good. There's several people that do pretty well up there, but it's not the numbers or the
gotcha.
like at Allatoona. There, at Allatoona, there's practically a tournament every night,
yeah.
one or more,
yeah.
except for Friday night that I know of.
That don't make no sense to me. Why there's no Friday night tournaments?
I don't know. We used to put one on years ago for one summer on Friday night, and a few people would show up, but. I don't know. I don't get that. I wish the Monday nighter was on Friday night.
Yeah.
Myself.
Well, even at Lanier, you see a lot of tournaments on Thursdays, Tuesdays. You don't see no Friday night tournaments like that, and I don't know why. So I don't
know.
Ask.
I guess some of the guys fish daytime Saturday tournaments at various places. Not at Allatoona, but
right.
Weiss and maybe other places they go to, Chickamauga and so forth. But I do. of course, I'm not promoting for another tournament down there because most people think there's too many on the lake now.
Right.
But I wish there was a good Friday night, or maybe instead of some of the other nights. But
it would seem to make more sense,
people get off. I would think that it would be a good time to do it. But what do I know?
Well, I understand. What's the biggest spot you've ever caught out of either lake?
Well, in 1982, I caught a 7.2 at Allatoona.
Really?
And at Carter's, I've caught a 6.7. Wow. And I've caught quite a few fish over 6 pounds at Carter's. 5, 6, 7 years ago, or a little more, we were catching 5s and 6 pounders on a pretty regular basis. I don't think we don't catch them now quite so.
I think
often.
Every lake has those cycles where it goes up and then it goes down a little bit. The spots in Allatoona versus the spots in Carter's. The reason I ask this is we've been kind of doing a little research based on another podcast. The spots in Lake Lanier and the spots on Allatoona are two different species of fish. A lot of people don't know that, and we're kind of working on that behind the scenes. Now, Carter's, is it the same as Allatoona or the same strain of spots as Lanier, or do you know?
Well, you wouldn't think that it would be the same as I don't know why there's such a difference in the lakes in truth, but I think the spots in Carter's are the Alabama Coosa River spotted bass.
Spots,
if you look at it, Carter's Lake is the most northern point of the headwaters of the Coosa River. You've got the Coosawhattie that comes in, forms Carter's Lake. It runs down to Calhoun and meets the Conasauga, and that makes the Oostanala right there at the Elks Club. It runs down to Rome, Georgia, downtown Rome, and meets the Etowah that comes out of Lake Allatoona, and that is the beginning of the great Coosa River right there in downtown Rome. And, the Coosa River spotted bass are world famous. But when you say we've got the Coosa River spotted bass in Carter's Lake, just like the Coosawhattie and the Carter's Lake is the northernmost headwaters of the Coosa River, you can say the same thing about the Etowah and Lake Allatoona, because it is the other tributary that forms in downtown Rome the Coosa River. So if Coosa River spotted bass have been native to that drainage area, the Coosa River Basin and its tributaries, you would think that fish would be the Alabama Coosa River spotted bass. And they just don't look exactly the same, even though I've caught some big ones. I caught a 580 in one of Bob Smith's tournaments year before last.
Right.
They're great looking fish, but not being a biologist, I guess I don't know the answer to that. And I've done some internet research, but I can't find anything that will actually tell you that. Jim Hackala was the area biologist, and I guess he still is. We were going to go fishing a couple of years ago, but that never materialized, and I really wanted to get him in the boat, and I wanted to quiz him about all that. Yeah, I hope I get to one day.
Well, we're looking at it, but just because Henry Cohen, one of our earlier podcast guests, was comparing Lake Lanier spots to Allatoona spots, and he was telling us that the Allatoona spot is a different creature in the way it fights compared to a Lanier. He said he knows the Laniers get bigger because they got the bait, but his own statement was if you tied a 5-pound Allatoona spot to a 5-pound Lake Lanier spot, that Allatoona spot's going to drag it all over the lake. So we're kind of looking into that and just kind of seeing that. Maybe you don't agree. That was his statement.
I don't know. I'm sure he knows what he's talking about.
Oh, I don't know.
But I hear a lot of things about smallmouth tied to a spotted bass and this, that, and the other. But spotted bass are mean machines, but I like to catch them all. The ones that
it don't matter.
The ones at Allatoona are maybe a little more precious than the ones at Carter's, just because they're rarer. But I'd love to catch another 6-pounder, much less anything bigger
I got you.
at Allatoona now. But I don't know what the differences are. I guess as a guide and fishing, I should know more, but I don't know the definitive answer to that. But I do know that those rivers are
They're all connected somehow on that side.
It's kind of funny where headwaters start for a lot of lakes and rivers, but
Right.
But those are definitely the headwaters in Georgia. And if you look at the coverage map for the Coosa River spotted bass, I saw one where when it looks into North Georgia, it's running up the Etowah and the Coosawhatee.
Coosawhatee. Okay, well, that's some good information. Carter's Lake has an interesting feature in that just on the other side of the dam, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have a small re-reg lake is what we call it, where a pump back lake. So they'll take water out and pump it back in. And a lot of our friends in the electric only world, they have tournaments on that. Anything you know about that side of the lake?
Well, the guys that fish it, and you guys may know a lot more than I know about it, but what I do know is a lot of people that catch there are some huge spotted bass down there. And a lot of people catch them when they're releasing water up near the tail race. Around there's rocks and things. There's big stripers, and there's a lot of fish caught up there. Now that thing is up and down. Not only do you have the release from Carter's down there in the pump back, you've got Talking Rock Creek that feeds that area too.
Okay.
And of course, when they've pumped a lot of water back and not and so forth, you can ride across there and you'll see that Talking Rock Creek is about the only thing you see.
Yeah, at times.
And of course, all the fish are relegated to go back in the channel. And I've known people that get in the channel and at different times have caught them, but more people that I actually know have caught them within the current when they're releasing up
when
there.
they're releasing that.
Yeah. But I'd say most of that is a mystery to me. I've only fished down there one time, but I've got friends that fish down there, and I knew one fella that he would watch the water releases, and that's when he would go, and he was known for catching some pretty nice spotted bass down there.
Okay, well, it's still a mystery for Josh and I as well. But even that, I guess that makes a lot of sense. Watch the current, and they'll, in that, I guess the channel, like you said. So current and channel. Yeah. If you were going to fish it, as little as you know, though, you would concentrate on the current.
I would
channel.
have to. I think otherwise, I don't know what else they would get on down there, but you can look at the area when it's the water is at its lowest, and there's a lot of mud flats and a lot of things, a lot of barren, what I would consider barren areas. They're just kind of mucky mud flats, and I don't see anything there to hold them other than if they've just some bait-oriented fish that got out there out of those ditches and channels.
And that's probably why we don't catch anything. We're on those flats, those mud flats and all like that. But it's an interesting lake.
Yeah.
I don't know of too many lakes in Georgia that kind of have that little small lake like that. And maybe there's some, I'm just not aware of it. Going from Carter's, a little farther north, is a little hidden jewel of a lake that a lot of people know about that you fish as well. And that's Blue Ridge.
Yeah.
And I have fished it a couple of times in the past and have been fortunate enough to catch a few smallmouth out of that lake. Now, as we were talking earlier before we started recording, you're telling me about spots getting into that and kind of really hurting that smallmouth population. If you could just give us a little bit about Blue Ridge and that situation.
Well, Blue Ridge is an older lake, a lot older than Carter's. Toccoa River feeds it. It's a beautiful lake. There's a lot of very expensive homes on that lake now. And it was known as perhaps Georgia's best smallmouth lake for many years. And I've had some unbelievable days up there catching smallmouth. But as has happened on some lakes in North Georgia, I guess spots were illegally introduced. Some of the fishermen started releasing spots there, and really on our highland lakes, spots just tend to take over a lake, and really it ruins the smallmouth fishery for the most part. And there may be, there's no maybe. There's a few smallmouth still left there, but not in the numbers. But there's getting to be some big spotted bass in that lake. And it's also a great walleye fishery. I think they've stocked walleye again in there. But years ago when I first started fishing Blue Ridge Lake, it was a deal. My first trips up there were in the fall at night, and we would again use small crankbaits and go around the rocky outcroppings, even across the face of the dam, and we would catch 15, 20, even 25 walleye at night down there. And
Really?
we'd catch a few bass in with it. If you used crankbaits, you could catch both the bass and walleye, but you could use spinner baits and catch bass mostly. But
Right.
On the full moons of October and November, those weeks, we used to go up there and fish quite a lot. But I like going up there. It's a beautiful lake. The spots, I've caught a 5-pound spot up there before and now, and mostly what I do catch is spotted bass up there now. But
Has it got herring in it?
it does have blueback herring in it. They've been introduced into that.
Okay.
And it's a fun lake. But the walleye fishery seems to be coming back a little bit. There's also a population of big largemouth in that lake.
Really?
I don't catch many of them, but I know some guys go up there and they use big swim baits and target docks early summer, and there may be other times, but I've seen some stringers of some really big largemouths. There's still a pretty good population
Really?
in there, but I never catch them.
Okay. Well, is Blue Ridge smaller than Carter's, or about the same size, or I don't know. That's what
acreage. I have known. I think they would be close to the same
size.
but I might be a little off. But there can't be a lot of
right.
difference in them. They're not big lakes, but it's fed by the Toccoa and on up. There's trout fishing in the Toccoa River.
Oh yeah,
but,
absolutely. And below the dam.
Yeah, I've never fished that, but I've got friends that fish it, and they catch some big trout down there.
Yeah, it's really cold water coming off the bottom of that lake. So.
But that lake's a fun lake to fish, and I guess it fishes somewhat, has some of the characteristics of Lanier and Carter's, in that there's a blueback effect to it.
Right,
You
right.
can catch fish offshore on top water in the summer and different things, but the ways that blueback change a spotted bass fishery, you can kind of see some similarities, although they're all a little different.
Right. Now, just circling back to Allatoona, because we didn't mention, does Allatoona have bluebacks?
Not to my knowledge. I've heard little rumors that people have found some, but I haven't.
And that's interesting. Why do you think?
Well, I don't know if fishermen have not put them in there like they have in other places, but I've read many times from the biologists that blueback will not thrive in Allatoona because of the relative low oxygen content in the summer and so forth. I always wondered if they always said that because they didn't want people trying to put them in there.
Right.
I guess, their look at idea, even at Lanier or whatever, that there might be a boom effect, but there's a opposite effect that's not good for the fish, to have a non-native fish introduced into the lake.
Right.
But, so I really don't know about that, but I do know it seems like since blueback became a big part of the forage base at Lanier, it seems like those fish are like on steroids.
Yeah, it has a little effect on the.
And we could tell it. I could tell how the bite changed at Carter's even when we began to get bites way offshore in the summer and fish coming up. That was not normal for Carter's. You could tell something was up.
And then it didn't take you long to figure out why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of those 3 lakes, if you could only fish one of them for the rest of your days here, which one of those lakes would it be? Or any lake?
Oh, gosh. I have people ask me all the time, what's your favorite lake? And
Yeah.
I guess I'm more stumped at that question than anything. But, if I had to fish a lake year-round, most people think this is crazy, but it'd have to be Allatoona. Because, Carter's is great when it's great, but
When it's
the
not, it's
summer,
not.
the summer up there, since I don't use live bait, the summer can be brutal at times up there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But now I love the fall and winter fishing up there. Some of the spring fishing can be great, but Allatoona's bigger. You got choices you can even go up the Etowah River at certain times of the year, and it's more like going to Weiss where you can flip and throw a square bill and do all kind of things that you wouldn't think about doing in Allatoona.
A lot of variety.
Yeah, the fish aren't as big, but it's a fun place. There's a lot of tournament activity there. If competition's your thing, there's tournaments left and right, and it would have to be that, even though Allatoona's might not be a lot of people's favorite place. Right. I get people that I take to some other lakes that live within miles of Allatoona that say, I never fished that lake.
Really?
Yeah.
It's just right there in their backyard. They don't care nothing for it.
No, but it's a fun lake. There's a tremendous spoon bite that starts in September through October. You can catch. I had a man and his 14-year-old son this past fall. We caught 82 one day on spoons, and that's just that's great fishing.
It is great, especially when a kid.
A wintertime crankbait lake. I don't ever use it, probably to my own detriment, but there's some guys that do really well fishing an Alabama rig through the winter down there. Mm-hmm. I'm not against them or anything like that. It's just, I guess, I don't know. It's just something. It's hard to throw everything.
It is, yeah. Especially if you got confidence in something else that you throw already.
But I know guys that do well in the winter tournaments, and they're big on Alabama rigs.
Yeah. And we've got a few of those buddies.
But that's just, I try to catch them a different way. I like the single swim bait. I like a jig. There's a great bite on a jig through the winter there. Shaky heads are good potentially year-round, anytime. Mm-hmm. If you had to just have one lure that you were going to fish every day down there, I don't know what would be better than a shaky head.
Right.
But and that goes for a lot of lakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. So you're in this guiding business, and it takes good business partners with all these good guides. So I noticed you got your Ranger hat on, and I got your G Loomis shirt on. And do you have companies like that help you?
Well, I do. I guess a thing about bass fishermen, even if you buy the stuff and you're endorsing it in some way, and
right.
You believe in it, and people wear their badges, whatever they are, and I'm just like the rest of them. But I am very fortunate. Dalton Marine and the people in Dalton, they're great to me. They help me with a boat, and I'm on the Mercury pro staff team, the Ranger pro staff, and that's great thing for me. They help me out some, and even Van Foster up there, the Bass Boat Technologies, these fancy mounts that the electronics are on. I've got 4 Solix Hummingbird 12-inch units on the boat, and people say, do you have to really have all that? And I say, no, you don't have to, but it's a lot of fun.
Sure does help, don't it?
And it works.
Right.
So, but no, I know guys that don't. They have they hardly have sonar on their boat, and they do pretty well. So the answer is you don't have to have it, but they can assist you in catching fish, and if you use them to do that, and that's part of your technique, it's an important part. So
Right.
Humminbird is a great ad. The guys at the dugout, they're great partners with me. They send me a lot of business, and probably my newest deal is with Shimano and G. Loomis, and I've always been a believer in their stuff, and they make some really great stuff. And a lot of people, the first thing they say, oh, it's too expensive. Well, the great thing about Shimano and G. Loomis, they've got some entry-level stuff that's in some cases lower than the competition, and it's great stuff. Their new
Right.
their new DC reels are the lowest priced ones ever. Like for $189 or $199, you can get a DC, a digital controlled bait casting reel that works fantastic. They've got new G. Loomis has the best of the best, and if you can appreciate it, and that's how you want to spend your money, that's the best. But
Right.
again, people say, you don't have to have that. Well, no, you don't. I know guys that can take a $49 ugly stick and catch them with, blindfolded too.
Right.
But it's just how you want to spend your money, and if you can appreciate light, advanced engineering tackle, nobody makes reels like Shimano does, and I'm happy to have them on board, and I appreciate having the opportunity to work with them.
Well, I mentioned that for a reason, and it's because earlier in the podcast you kind of mentioned something about your health. You had some health issues, and we have talked, and we want to tell everybody this story for several reasons, and one of them being the situation we're getting ready to talk about. But it's almost when you talk about all these people willing to help you, I see that as a blessing and grace and stuff like that just ties in with this story we're getting ready to tell everybody. And, it's inspiring to me, and I think it'd be best coming from your mouth if you want to start it and just kind of guide us into this little journey that you've been on the last few years.
Okay. I guess, I've rocked along in my life, and I've been healthy, and never had to go to the doctor very much, and never wanted to go to the doctor very much.
And none of us do.
But as you get older, you have things, and you have to take care of your health, and or some little something can trip you up. Well, a few years back, in 2013, I had some issues. My digestive system, my food just didn't seem like it was digesting, and anyway, I thought, well, I've got a doctor's appointment coming up. I'm going to tell him a little something about that. And I mentioned it, and doctor did some tests and did a little x-ray, and he said, well, your gallbladder's got to come out. I said, that's routine. Everybody, or a lot of people have that. And I said, well, okay. And so I went in, had that done, and really the next few days I couldn't tell any difference. And I told the doctor when I went back for a checkup, I said, nothing's changed. And he said, well, something takes a while to adjust to having your gallbladder removed sometimes, so let's let it go just a little bit, and if it stays the same, we'll do some more tests. Well, ultimately I went back, and they sent me for a CT scan, and they discovered I had a mass on my pancreas. Well, of course, they said, don't worry about this, that could be a lot of things, and don't get too alarmed. So they sent me to Emory, and basically they told me, well, you've got a mass on your pancreas, you got pancreatic cancer, it's in your liver. The problem with pancreatic cancer is it's too far gone by the time there's any symptoms, and people just it's just not caught in time. And he said, we're sorry to tell you, but you've got just a few months to live, and there's nothing we can do about it.
And this is in 2013.
Yes.
Right.
And anyway, they said, our advice is go home and get your affairs in order.
Yeah, and before you go on, how does hearing that?
Well, I prepared. I was hoping that I wouldn't hear this, but I prepared myself to hear the worst news so that if it was anything less than that, I'd be happy. Now, my wife was not prepared for that, and
Right.
they told us that, and it just crushed her, and she couldn't believe it, and I just I didn't like it, but I was prepared to hear that.
Right.
I braced myself for it, and so I figured when I left there that day, I said, I'll probably never go fishing again. I said, the first thing I had to do is sell both my boats, and so my wife won't have that to deal with. And I even gave my son a lot of tackle and said, sell this stuff on eBay, and y'all keep the money.
You gonna make me cry here, so.
And they did, but I didn't sell it all. I kept a few things. I figured closer on down I'd let them have it all and sell it, and we didn't even know what to do. I mean, we didn't know which way to turn, and my wife would ask this doctor and that doctor and get different answers. But at any rate, long story short, I decided to get on chemo, and I found out, I thought, maybe there's somewhere special in the country I can go and get this very best treatment that, everybody doesn't get, or find out where it's at. Well, what I found out, that there was a protocol drug regimen for pancreatic cancer, and you can get that anywhere. So I just got it in Calhoun there. Dr. James Turner was my doctor, and so I started on chemo, and for whatever reason, I tolerated it okay. Now, I didn't feel great, and I felt sick and so forth, and but anyway, that rocked on for a few months, and I still figured, it'll stretch it out, and
Right.
whatever. I'll enjoy my time with my family, and but anyway, after about 9 months, we'd done some scans. He said, you've reacted great to this chemo, and gosh, we've had about 65 or 55% reduction in that main tumor. And he said, we need to go back to Emory and get another analysis. And so I went back down there, and they said, it's great that you've done well on chemo, but you're not going to be able to take chemo very much longer. It's not, it quits working, and when it does, it's just going to go boom again. So nothing's changed. We can't operate. The tumor's too complex. And so I went back to my doctor and told him that they said there's no difference. It doesn't really matter. And he says, well, I don't believe that. We need a second opinion. And he said, there's 2 or 3 places in the country. If you can go, you ought to go. So I chose to go to MD Anderson in Houston. I went out there, met with the doctors. They looked at everything. They said, yeah, you've got pancreatic cancer, stage 4. It's in your liver. But the surgeon said, I do more of these than anybody in the world. And he said, I can take that tumor out. But we do not do surgery if it's metastasized. He said, if we could get your liver tumor under control, get rid of that, he said, I can take it out. He said, I don't know if it'll help, but I can take it out.
Right.
And I said, what do you mean it might not help? Why would you say that? He said, well, I do all these operations, and we're the best in the world out here, but pancreatic cancer always comes back. There's no cure for pancreatic cancer. So, well, he said, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to do it because I know what's going to happen if I don't.
Right.
So in February, I had my pancreas, about half of it removed, my spleen removed. I was out there for about a month. The surgery was about a 7-hour surgery. I didn't know if I'd ever come home or whatever, but I did, and I got to where I could eat a little bit, and everything. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to get over that operation, but I did, and that was in February. I went back for scans in July, and I was all clear. No cancer anywhere. So they said, come back in 3 months. I went back in 3 months, and they said, it's back in your liver. So from that point, I had various treatments. I was on an experimental drug. I went out there every 21 days for experimental drugs, had scans, had more chemo, and I don't know, over 2 years ago, they told me, you've had so much chemo, a lot of people have nerve damage, hands and feet, and can you still button your shirt? Can you tie a knot? And I said, well, yeah, I can still do all that. And so in September, over 2 years ago, I guess it's approaching 2.5 years now, they said, we're going to give you a break on this chemo. You've had a ton of this chemo, and nothing good's going to come from that if we stay on that. And so I took a break, went back the first of the year, and they said, well, there's been no change. And if anything, it might be smaller. So for the longest, I was going back every 3 months and not having any treatments. And so now that's been for well over 2 years, and now I'm going every 6 months. And really, this is not a sad story. I mean, I've been blessed, and, I've had chemo. My normal chemo routine was to go in the office on Tuesday at 8 o'clock and get out of there at 4 and wear a pump home for 2 days. Well, in the summer when I was having chemo, after I got out of chemo on Tuesday, I did a lot of night trips. I'd do night trips the next night. Now, I couldn't do one on Thursday night because I had to go at 5 o'clock and get my pump off most of the time, and I was like a dog off the chain then. I was running around the yard and the edge of the fence and whatever, getting that pump off of me. But,
so you're guiding straight through this?
Yeah.
Not stopping?
I've never missed a guide trip because of chemo or whatever. I haven't scheduled a trip when I would go to Texas, but but no, it hasn't affected me, and I'm not as young as I used to be, but I fish 12 hours lots of times. And in fact, some of my clients, I usually just fish till they say they want to quit, and most of the time they want to quit before I do. So so
that's unreal.
So I'm blessed. I'm happy. I guess when I first was diagnosed with this, I had 2 or 3 grandkids. Now I have 7, and I've seen them all, and they're growing, and one of them will be driving in another year or 2. And so it's been nobody wants to get pancreatic cancer or cancer of any kind, but there is a life beyond that. I'm a believer. I know I've been fortunate. I'm not special. I've gotten better than I deserve, and I don't know why, but all I know is I say don't give up and fight, and I've been fortunate, and I wish that was all there was, and there was a secret I could tell people that are going through that would make them pull through it, and I don't have the answers for that, but I know, I know the doctors are smarter than I am, and when they told me I wasn't going to live that long, I believed them because I figured they knew what they were talking about, but I'm glad they were wrong.
Right. Well, it's an inspiring story. Number one, that you were able to work all the way through it, and you're still here and you're still doing all that stuff even after all that time. I mean, I teared up like a big old baby when you was talking about, I've got a son. I can't imagine, I have a wife and all that, and I understand that relationship, but I could not imagine looking at my son and saying, here's my stuff. How tough that had to be.
Yeah, it was my prized possessions, but when everything's stripped away, all you got's family and friends, and I had a lot of people that offered up a lot of prayers for me. I'm a believer. I believe there's a reason that the Lord has kept me here. I don't know if it's for my grandkids. I don't know. Whatever it is, I hope I'm fulfilling that that promise and that what testimony I've got in the boat of I've been able to live through this up to now. People say, you're in remission or you've beat it. Well, I say, no, I haven't beat it. I still have it, but by the grace of God, I'm able to function and be out here doing a job that I really like, getting to fish, and in some ways I almost feel guilty for it, but I'm thankful, and I think the power of prayer and believing in the Lord is, people can say that's hokey and it's this and it's random, whatever, but I believe what I believe, and I'm not going to change.
Amen. I understand that completely. I just got goosebumps, so I think it is a testimony of faith, but you just didn't give up either.
No.
You didn't get up, and I know people that get that, that C word, and they lose all hope. But one of the reasons why I was glad you were coming, because we had talked about that. I was like, when you told me that, you sent me the text, and I was looking at the dates, and I was like, good Lord, what this man's been through, and he still wants to come down here and talk to me about it. So that's why I could not wait to get you in, just for that alone. The fishing stuff's great, but I will take more from the last 5 minutes than all the fishing knowledge you could ever give me. That's just a testimony of your faith. So I'm going to start crying again. I got to stop. But anyway, that's just great. I can't thank you enough just for sharing that.
I'm happy to be here. I'm honored to be here. You've had some great guests.
Well, it's humbling the people that come through here, and that includes yourself. It's just one of the best stories I've ever heard.
Well, I hope somebody out there somewhere gets something from it. I hope, I don't know how much fishing knowledge I've imparted, but, I hope somebody gets something from it.
Well, I did, and I'm sure they will. So, all right, Bill, so, we've covered a lot of stuff tonight. If someone is interested in getting you to take them out, be it Allatoona, Carter's, or wherever, how can they get in touch with you?
All right. My direct phone number is 706-280-2305, but I don't expect you to remember that. But, of course, I'm on Facebook. It has links to my contact information. You can message me through Facebook. You can message me through this phone number. It's got my phone number on there. And also I have a website that's linked to my Facebook page. But if you don't see that on my Facebook page, it's simple to remember. It's www.billpayneguideservice.com. And on there, there's several. There's an email. My phone number's there. Other information about trips, from cost to what I provide to what to expect on a trip, but you can look at all that. I have a few little articles on there. We're going to be loading much more. I've got probably 20 articles that haven't been posted yet, and it's really full of information. But there's nothing like, I get a lot of text and communicate through email and text, but I'm free to talk to you on the phone face to face if you want to talk, and I'd love to have you in the boat, and if you need anything, all you got to do is get in touch with me.
Bill, I appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Fish North Georgia podcast. If y'all have any topics or guests you'd like to see in the future, leave it in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button, click that bell, so that you'll be notified of any future videos. And don't forget to give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram at Fish North Georgia. And we look forward to seeing you soon.